Breaking news out of Northeastern University.
We have Sky Ranger live over campus where police are surrounding a tent encampment. This is happening at the Centennial Common on Northeastern's campus. And Colton, we have been monitoring this all afternoon, which started just after 9 o'clock this morning, where protesters came in. And once again, we just want to stress that what they are asking for is to what they're calling disclose, divest, denounce. This is about money going to Israel.
So what they're talking about when they say disclose, divest, denounce, they're saying disclose the university's financial investments, divest and cut ties with Israeli companies. And they're also saying to denounce what they say is Israel's genocide in Palestine, calling for an immediate ceasefire as well. But again, this is at Northeastern University, Centennial Common right here. Our camera's going to zoom out so that you can see just about how many people are there right now. Earlier this hour, it looked like about 100 people. It looks like there's even more people who have arrived as well.
More bystanders for sure. Those are the people outside the circle. So again, this is Centennial campus. And what Northeastern told them very early this morning was that they're violating student conduct. The violation of the code of conduct for students. That's what the encampment is doing. So it's not about the protest per se.
Right.
It's about the fact that they are these, again, this sort of livable space that they've done since early this morning. But having cited that, the violation came out from the university after 9 o'clock this morning. Here we are at 2:45. And we are only now just seeing police officers, Boston police, now encircling the encampment itself. So this has been very quiet, passive, Colton, for hours.
For hours now. We've been keeping a close eye on it. Our Eli Rosenberg is there. He's live for us on the campus there at Northeastern. Eli, good afternoon. Tell us what you were seeing, what the crowd feels like. What's the energy there right now?
All right, so we are looking right now at Centennial Common here on Northeastern's campus. There are more than 100 people here that are gathered arm in arm, forming a ring here. And beyond that ring, you see some of the tents that have sprouted up here on campus. Now, within the last half hour, a police officer with Northeastern went around with a bullhorn and instructed everybody that they were going to start asking people for IDs, so proof that they were indeed Northeastern students. That has not happened yet. 45 minutes ago, we saw more than a dozen Boston police cars and vans pull up on campus here. There was already a large police presence when we got here. That amplified about 45 minutes ago, and that's where you saw some of the police officers. Now, outside that ring, you're seeing some of the people who have gathered here, who go to school here, who heard what was happening here, and came out here to gather. But all the focus in terms of talking and seeing what police are focused on is on this ring right here where people have gathered. They have been chanting pro-Gaza chants while we've been here. They've been asking the university to cut ties with Gaza. This is similar to what we've seen on some other campuses in the Boston area, including earlier this morning on Emerson College's campus, where more than 100 people, according to Boston police, were detained. So far, since we have been here, we have not seen anybody detained. We have not seen any action by Boston police. The only police action we did see was that Northeastern University police officer going around with a bullhorn and instructing people that at some point they were going to start asking people for IDs. Those who did not have IDs, according to this officer when he was talking to these people, was they'd be escorted off campus. Then we saw these police officers within the last 10 minutes that you see here wearing these vests that say Boston police that came in with that caravan that I mentioned about 45 minutes ago. They pulled up. They had gathered in the parking lot. They were receiving instructions. We've seen a lot of back and forth between what looks like a lieutenant or sergeant with Boston police and some liaisons with Northeastern University going back and forth, talking, pointing at things, making some phone calls. After they had gathered in the parking lot where you're seeing right here, they came in two columns and came around and walked around and encircled what we are seeing right here. And that is where we are right now, where we see these officers who have encircled these people that have gathered. We haven't been able to talk to the people here because police are keeping us away, so we don't know. Are these students? We do see some people wearing shirts that say they are faculty supporting students, but we do not know if everyone you're seeing here actually goes to Northeastern, heard what was happening and showed up, or a mix of one of those. So it'll be interesting to talk with them once this reaches some sort of conclusion. But what we're seeing right here is like this right here, where you see people talking and gathering among police, a mix of Northeastern police officers right there talking, then communicating with Boston police, and then gathering again. So kind of where we are right now in terms of logistics, trying to figure things out here, but a lot of pointing, a lot of talking, a lot of phone calls. As all this is happening, those students here have gathered. They've asked people that have gathered to watch to join them. We've seen a few students walk up, and as each student walks up and joins this ring, there's a loud cheer from the crowd here that have gathered in terms of joining these people here in a ring. We have not seen anyone leave that ring, only people join that ring. So that's where it stands right here on the Northeastern campus. Don't know what to expect, but as we saw earlier today on Emerson, these things do happen fast, where 1 minute they were gathered in that right of way outside Emerson, and the next minute police came in. Unlike, though, what we saw this morning, we don't see any police with those long sticks, the staffs that they carry. We haven't seen police with that. We have seen police officers. If you want to come right here, see how they have the zip ties? They use those zip ties in occasions like that to come in as they maybe plan to detain a large number of people. Obviously, they're not going to use handcuffs for each one, so they do use those zip ties. So we've seen officers carrying those zip ties. As I mentioned just a minute ago, we have not seen anyone detained here, only that warning to students. That's where we stand right now.
Eli, I just wanted to ask you, since you've been right there on the ground, only difference that we've seen, or two differences in the last, let's say, 15 minutes, all of the protesters had been standing stoically, and it's been quite quiet. As the police started to move in and encircle them, as you see right there, they all sat down, clearly making a statement that in many ways it seems that you will have to drag them. But now that they've made the announcement officially asking them to leave, do you get any sense, are they digging in their heels more, or do you get any sense that perhaps any of these students might obey that request and leave Centennial Common at Northeastern here?
I don't see anyone leaving. In fact, when police showed up, if only people did come, there is one person driving a backpack. Unclear where they're going right there, as you see them by where those snacks are situated. So unclear if anyone's actually left from our vantage point right here. We have seen, as I mentioned, people gathering and joining them and coming arm to arm with people. You see some of them sitting right here, and then if you come over this way, Dom, you see some of them locked arm in arm as they sit down here. So there's no sense that this is going to wind down anytime soon in terms of they're just going to pick up their stuff, take down their tents, gather their snacks, and actually leave. But as you also see, there's no sense that police are going to be leaving anytime soon. They're kind of just standing here monitoring, some of them facing the people who have gathered here on Centennial Common, some of them facing away looking at the crowd. And quite a large crowd has gathered here. That's the one thing that has changed besides the police that have gathered here, is that the crowd has gathered here as well. Some people, as you see right here, holding Israeli flags, some people just watching as things develop here. So that's the situation in terms of kind of at a stalemate right now. It will be interesting to see how this plays out, obviously, the next 10, 20, 30 minutes in terms of, is there any motion or movement by police to kind of get this disbanded? Will they actually heed the warnings they've been given and dissemble what they have here and leave Centennial Common? But obviously that is unclear right now as more people continue to gather on the outside and police watch as things develop here.
That's what we've noticed, Eli, is that how many more bystanders there are, getting close to 3 o'clock now. There weren't many people who were just standing and watching. As you see right there, you're seeing a lot of people who are now starting to gather. It seems to me, everyone is preparing. Colton, wouldn't you agree that everyone is preparing as if now we're waiting for something to happen, whereas before there was just a feeling of steadiness, a calmness.
And you can see the rise in the situation there. Eli, I'm curious from your vantage point. We can't see from here in the studio or from our bird's eye view here. From your vantage point, are you seeing mostly students out there? Can you see, are there any faculty members from Northeastern who are joining those students on either side of the protest right now?
Let's come to Dom's camera right now because I can show you those two people in white shirts that have shirts on that says Northeastern faculty staff supports students. So we haven't been able to talk to them, so it's unclear the relationship of anyone here, but they are definitely wearing shirts right there that say Northeastern faculty and staff supports students. As I mentioned, it'll be interesting to talk to some of these people if we get the chance to find out, are they Northeastern students? Are they people who heard about what was going on and came down here? Just a quick mention about the calendar here, talking with some students. students. A lot of people are finishing up. There was a student who had a final yesterday but stayed on campus because of all of this was going on. So in terms of where we are in the calendar, we've been on campus here for other stories, and this right here is one of the hearts of Northeastern. We are really close to the C-stop. Ruggles is right over there. And so this is a meeting point, so to speak, of people who are on campus. We've seen it a lot busier than this just on a normal, let's say a Tuesday or Thursday we were here for a story or something. But there is definitely a crowd that has gathered here. Getting the sense talking to students that there would be more people here, let's say this happened 2-3 weeks ago, in terms of just the amount of students on campus. But where we are on the calendar, this is the crowd that has gathered here today. Unclear, though, if we're looking at students right here, staff, faculty, people from the outside who know what was going on, but definitely some shirts right there that say they are faculty.
So just to provide a little context, I'm sure a lot of people are curious as to why this is happening, right? Students across the country, not only here in Boston, students across the country at a growing number of U.S. colleges, they're gathering in these sort of protest encampments that you see there on the left of your screen. It's about 10 or so tents there in the middle of this. And they're doing so in a unified demand of their schools to stop doing business with Israel or any company that support the ongoing war in Gaza. And that demand that has roots in the boycott, divestment, and the sanctions movement as well that JC touched on a little earlier.
We remember it's been about 6 months since the October 7th attack by Hamas on Israel, and tensions have only grown since then. Eli, if I can just bring it back to you for a moment. We will be really interested if you can speak to eventually one of those members wearing the white T-shirts that say that Northeastern faculty and staff support students, because protests, as Colton just mentioned, have been happening at Harvard, at Emerson, and Harvard came out saying professors, faculty, staff, and Staff for Justice in Palestine support the students. Their quote was, "Encampments teach us all how to hold power to account as universities fail to prevent genocide." That is from Faculty Staff for Justice in Palestine. So I know, Eli, you're standing farther out because you need that Northeastern ID, not to mention we're press and they're keeping us out. Is there anybody on the outside that looks like you might be able to reach them that's faculty or a student as such to discuss how they're feeling about this moment?
Well, JC almost says, if you read my mind, I'm joined right now by the executive director of Hillel Northeastern. Can you talk a little bit about what you're feeling right now as you watch this?
I would like campus to be an environment where we can have constructive conversations about how we create a peaceful future in the Middle East for Jews and Palestinians, and this is not helping us get there. And I am feeling saddened for students who are out here risking being arrested and for something that I think would be much better managed by us working together to try and find real solutions.
What's the best way to achieve that, especially considering what we see right now? We have these students here, we have Boston police, we have campus police here. What's the best path forward as we stand here right now?
I think this administration and the campus has done a really good job of keeping peace on campus and helping it create an environment where students on all sides of this conflict can feel like their voices can be heard and safe. This is not doing that. I believe that non-Northeastern students should not be on campus right now, and that they need to help those people off of campus so that we can have the best chance of actually working towards solutions of what is a really challenging and difficult problem in Israel and Gaza right now, not to mention in the surrounding countries.
Which brings me to my next question. Any sense of what we're looking right here? How many are students and how many are people that are not students?
My guess is that at least half of the people in that circle are not students, from the numbers of people I recognize and don't recognize.
And talking to other people on other stories, there's been a sense of unease on campus. How have members of Hillel felt? Thank you for your time right now. So you hear a cheer from the crowd, guys, because this is the scene right here where Boston police officers who are standing around the circle are now walking back. This is the way that they came when they walked onto Centennial Common. So now there seems to be a de-escalation from when police moved in. And you saw a lot of the people sit down and link arms. Let's go this way real quick, and you can see Boston police officers going back. This is the way they came. So they're going back to their vehicles here. There was no command. There was no verbal any sense. All of a sudden, we heard a cheer as we were talking to the executive director of Hillel. We turned around, and this is what we saw right here. So Boston police officers are going back to where their vehicles were, where they came in now about an hour ago, as this circle of people who have gathered. The executive director of Hillel estimated about 50%, which was one of our questions, 50% students, 50% from the outside, against, based on her estimation, continued to gather here. Let's try and get some more facts here. We'll come back to you in just a minute.
Eli, what we were just watching here in the studio, what appeared to be the protesters, when you heard that eruption of cheers, what appeared to be happening was the protesters were engaging with the BPD there on what could be possible negotiations for the protesters out there.
Well, that's what we're wondering, right? Because as Eli just said, there was no command, no bullhorn moment of, police, back up, et cetera. So something clearly happened here. So is there an understanding that give us another hour and we'll leave peacefully, et cetera? We don't know. What was interesting was Eli's conversation just now with the executive director of Hillel on campus, saying this is not a constructive conversation. From their point of view, there are other ways to do this, and these are students, and now it sounds like half of them faculty, willing to be arrested versus perhaps finding another way to have the discussion for the issues that they have their greatest concerns over. And it's not just Northeastern, it's campuses across the country, Colton, as you mentioned, and the major arrests that happened, about 100 arrests at Emerson
overnight
last night. Exactly.
And school canceled there on campus
at Emerson.
Yeah, at Emerson. So if you're just joining us right now, it is just about 3 o'clock here at NBC 10 Boston. We've been monitoring this situation. This is at Northeastern here, Centennial Common there on campus. It's right in front of Ryder Hall, right not far from the Ruggles T station. This encampment here, if you look on the left, you can see there's about 100 or so protesters, and they have about 10 or so tents there in the middle. And that number, JC and I, Eli as well, we've seen that number of folks swell over the last hour and a half or so.
Well, and also the part that brings the could bring the tension up are the number of bystanders. And one of the things that the executive director of Hillel had said was Northeastern has done a really good job of keeping peace on campus. And the one concern here is, are you all Northeastern students?
Yeah.
Who else is coming in? And we do know they were checking IDs, student IDs. Has that been managed? Are there other, students from other campuses coming here in support? That's a question that will be answered later. But certainly, in terms of keeping the peace, it's about this is Northeastern students at least as they feel it should be.
And again, this is a pro-Palestinian encampment here. That's what they're trying to make their voices heard. But you're also looking at it appears that there are some pro-Israel voices who are there starting to arrive as well. Now, again, the big question here, and we mentioned this a few moments ago, and we finally found the answer, is does the encampment violate the student code of conduct? We know that the protest does not, but does the encampment, those 10 or so tents that are set up there, again, on the left side of your screen, does that violate the student code of conduct? And we have heard that it does. Now, again, this is Centennial Common, right in front of Ryder Hall near the Ruggles T station, about 100 or so protesters. That number continues to grow. And just for some context here as to why this is happening, and JC and I touched on this, Eli touched on this as well, it's not only Northeastern, it's not only Harvard, it's not only Emerson, it's students at a growing number of U.S. colleges across the country that are all gathering in these encampments with a unified demand of their schools. And they're asking for them to stop doing business with Israel or any company that supports the ongoing war in Gaza.
All right, let's bring in Sue O'Connell. She's standing by in our newsroom because, Sue, give us some context here. We're talking about protests that have to do with Gaza, divesting funds, the university funds from Israel. Can you compare this or discuss this about Occupy Boston, what the comparison and the contrast?
Yeah, that's a good question, JC. Remember back in 2011, for I think 70 days, there was Occupy Boston that happened in Boston, and in many ways, again, we're seeing what we're seeing here, and the police negotiating in some ways, and especially after what happened last night in the Emerson campus area. Boston Police Commissioner then, Billy Evans, was someone, he wasn't the commissioner then, but he was in charge of the Occupy Boston police response. And what he did as the person there, the police representative, is he went into Occupy Boston, met with people who had tents, met with the organizers, gave them his cell phone number, and said to them, listen, this is your right to protest. There are things that you care a lot about here, but we don't want any violence. We don't want this to escalate. We don't want any bad actors to be involved in here. And he worked with them to make sure that it was as safe as it could be. And I think in response to what we saw last night in the Emerson response, that this might be a more soft police approach, which is a term that many police departments use. Instead of responding with the gear, the protective gear that the police are wearing, if you respond in polo shirts or respond in more soft clothing, it implies, listen, we're going to work with you. We don't want this to become violent. And hopefully, I mean, just from an objective standpoint, we don't want to see any violence. So hopefully that's what some of the negotiations are happening here, JC and Colton.
Sue, really quickly, can you talk about the influence of the media, but not only the media, social media, right, for these young people, and the impact and the influence that it is having on campuses across the country as it pertains to the ongoing war in Gaza?
Yeah, it's interesting. We have a generation here that has grown up with this situation in Gaza, which is unlike how people who are of a different age and older age have grown up. So their viewpoint of what is happening and the Israel position in the Middle East is often being fed by some really horrific and terrible real things that have been happening, as well as being fed by some things that haven't happened or that are being exploitive or are being used by, again, bad actors from other places who are trying to make things worse. At the same time, you know, this is a generation here. Many of these students did not get to have their full, complete 4 years of college due to COVID, depending on when they started. So there's a renewed sort of energy in being passionate about things that you care about. And, you know, certainly we want to have Americans, we want to have young citizens who are expressing their First Amendment rights and expressing something that they are unhappy about. But also the ability of social media to amplify certain things is also something that I think we all, no matter what age we are, we need to be concerned about making sure we're making the right choices. You know, I've been joking a little bit with some of the younger people in the newsroom about how many, in my earlier career as an activist, how many marches I have been on with people where they didn't know really why they were marching. And that's from my generation. I'm not talking about these folks here. But understanding the complex issues that are happening and expressing in a way that is actually going to help elicit a change that you want, I think, is something that perhaps we're starting to see on these college campuses.
Well, to that point, Sue, can we just also contrast with Emerson last night? Because Boston police, you know, they broke down the pro-Palestinian encampments on Emerson College's campus overnight. More than 100 people, I believe, were arrested. Of course, the school is saying they are welcome back. They're trying to work with all those students. They were there for them if they had to appear in court. But the difference is Emerson being, Northeastern is in the city, but clearly has a distinct campus. Yeah. Last night, Emerson was almost in the streets of the theater district. Do you believe that's the difference, that we have a more contained situation that also is not prohibiting students from getting to their classrooms or wherever they need to go?
Yeah, I think that's it exactly, JC. I mean, I'm an Emerson graduate, not this Emerson, but the old Emerson that used to be over on Beacon Street on the corner of Berkeley and Beacon. Emerson doesn't have a private campus per se, where there's an entrance and an exit. Many people think of the Boston Common as Emerson's campus because there's no walls, there's no fence, there's no Harvard garden, and there's no Harvard yard. There's none of those things. So where it looks like the students who are participating in the event last night was city property. That alleyway actually leads to a state building, the state transportation building. So the response to that, again, I'm not sure on who called who and what the police response was. My understanding was that the Boston police were enacting that no camping, overnight camping rule that is on the books to try and keep homeless camps and populations down. But again, those people who were protesting last night were on public property, not on Emerson property. And that's some of the big difference here between what we're seeing across the country, as Colton was alluding to, but also here on Northeastern. Now, I live not far from this Northeastern campus in Roxbury, just less than a mile away. And you can actually go all the way around a Northeastern campus. You're allowed to kind of cut through and drive through in certain areas. So this is a distinct spot away from the rest of the city, which I'm sure some people don't even know that it's happening. So I think that might be part of the difference in the response here as well.
All right, Sue, stay with us. We're going to come back to you in just a moment for more context. In the meantime, let's get to NBC 10's Kirsten Glavin. She's live for us there on the campus. Kirsten, good evening. Tell us what you're seeing from your vantage point right now.
Hey there, yeah, a very large demonstration going on right now here on campus. Hundreds of people are out here. You can hear the chanting. I want to give you a minute to listen to some of this. Here you go. You can see a number of people are out here on the grass, and we have police nearby as well. They've been telling a lot of these demonstrators they do have to move, but so far no one has left the area. We've seen about a half a dozen tents so far set up in the middle of the grass here. Police again surrounding the group for several hours, with some faculty warning them to leave the property. Now, these Northeastern students are the latest to set up an encampment protest on campus. The reason for it, they tell us, is to show solidarity with Gaza and demand Northeastern's administration disclose and divest their financial relationships with Israeli companies. A number of Jewish students are frustrated with the university for allowing this demonstration today. We've been talking to both students and faculty about that, so that has also been a concern. There have been talks about potential arrests if these groups do not leave the area. So far, we haven't seen that. We have seen a number of law enforcement officers walk around the circle here, though, and just kind of showing their presence, showing that they are here to help. We know that Boston police were called in as well to assist campus police in monitoring the situation to make sure everybody stays safe, to make sure everything remains peaceful here. But again, still ongoing. This has been going on since around noon, actually a little bit before that. We arrived around noon, but we're told this happened this morning. You can see a number of people around here as well watching. So still an ongoing situation. We did reach out to Northeastern University for a statement to see if they have any comment about the demonstration that is going on, and we're still waiting to hear back. But that's the latest live here at Northeastern. I'm Kirsten Glavin, NBC 10 Boston.
Kirsten, stay with us right here. One of the things that Northeastern said very early this morning, about just before 10 a.m., they were given a warning that they were violating student conduct, and then they were also told that their IDs would be checked to once again ensure that these are all Northeastern students. From our vantage point, we haven't seen any checkpoint such as that. You're on the outside there. Have you, even yourself getting on campus, have you seen anything where they're checking either that you're press or a Northeastern current student?
So we haven't seen them physically check IDs. We did hear a faculty member of some sort get on a megaphone and announce that they were going to be checking IDs within 15 minutes or so. And so that was said, not well received. There was chanting back after that point. So we haven't actually seen anyone comply with that yet. But that was said, that was told to people here. There also have been concerns that there are other students here from other college campuses that did come to join in on this protest and demonstrate today. We did hear that some Emerson folks did come here as well, but have not independently confirmed that. But that is something that we are looking into right now, just to see who is present and taking part in this demonstration.
All right, Kirsten, thanks so much. It is 3:09 in the afternoon. We're going to tell you what we have been seeing here for the last about 30 or so minutes. This is Centennial Common. This is at Northeastern University. That is right across from Ryder Hall. It's right near the Ruggles T Station. Right there in the middle, you see about 10 or so tents, that encampment that's there. This is what a lot of students, a lot of young people across the country here in Boston and beyond have been doing here. They're using these protest encampments with a unified demand across the country and here in Boston of their schools to stop doing business with Israel or any of the companies that support the ongoing war in Gaza.
We have Todd McGee on the phone, one of our security experts. Todd, thanks for joining us, because the question that we have right now is the police presence, Boston police and Northeastern police, were on the perimeters. Yes, they have their patrol cars, more than a dozen. You can see their bicycles lined up. They stayed on the perimeter. At one point recently, they just started to close in, and then they went back. What does that signal to you? We're getting the impression there was some sort of discussion back and forth, and so the police sort of backed off. Can you describe what police technique is at this point?
Absolutely. In incidents like this, what public safety immediately forms up is what's called incident command. And what they will do is it's an opportunity for multiple agencies to be able to collaborate and work together and synchronize their response. So when we saw the movement of the officers, there was probably some assessment from someone that's one of the officers, one of the supervisors that's there amongst the peaceful protesters that relayed information back to the unified command and advised them that our presence might be escalating, the energy in the crowd is changing. Maybe it's best that we show less force in a prudent decision to allow these protesters to exercise their First Amendment. So, again, a delicate balance. Also, public safety is there to make sure that no agitators or uninvited guests join this assembly, which would either shut the protest down or at least cause arrest action on behalf of the police.
Can you talk really quickly, Todd, about how this is different from other protests that we have seen, in the sense of this is on a college campus. These are there's a lot of young people. There's also adults as well. But can you talk about the approach with the fact that this is a protest that has been spearheaded by young people here?
So we are seeing that across the country. We're seeing this younger generation really get involved in these global affairs, and they're leveraging their First Amendment and really leveraging against the administrations. So I think this is something that we will continue to see in the future. I think this is something where there's a degree of success. They're being the different protesters are being more coordinated, and so as long as we can stay peaceful, things will be fine. But it's when the uninvited guests, the agitators, that will basically interrupt the peaceful protests. And that's when law enforcement has to make some hard decisions to either consider this an unlawful assembly and start to shut things down, or to surgically remove the agitators. So again, with the younger crowd here, very difficult.
Sorry for cutting you off there. I just want to ask you really quickly, who technically is calling the shots here? This is technically Northeastern property. So they are saying they're violating student code of conduct. Outside of an agitator who may start something physical, who calls the shot on when this ends? Is it Northeastern that's asking for the assistance from Boston police, or do Boston police say that's enough? You've been violating student code. I'm not sure who actually has sort of quote unquote jurisdiction here.
Jurisdiction typically in this case where Boston police deploys, they would be in charge. They most likely are. However, that being said, it's in coordination with Northeastern. So any type of police action on behalf of Boston police will be coordinated. It will be discussed. Hopefully there are contingency plans that are already in place for whatever transpires.
All right.
So again, that's your need for unified command to be able to make those hard decisions.
Todd McGee, we always appreciate your input, security expert for us here on NBC 10 Boston. Of course, we'll be back in touch with Todd as these moments progress. Colton.
Yeah. All right, stay with us here on NBC 10 Boston. We're going to have much more from this encampment as police there. Boston Police, University Police, they're monitoring this protest at Northeastern. Again, this is at Centennial Common. That is right across from Ryder Hall. It's right near the Ruggles T Station. In the center of your screen, you can see about 10 or so tents, and it started out about 100 or so protesters. We've seen that number continue to swell here, so stay with us on NBC 10 Boston as our team is on the ground. We'll have much more at 4.
Eli Rosenberg, Kirsten Glavin there for us, and as Colton just mentioned, yes, we're back at 4 o'clock and always online at NBC10Boston.com.